My story has to do with things that happened to me as a child. When I was 6 years old, my parents bought a very old house, probably around 100 years old, and that was back in 1976. It was a very large home, and some of the original wallpaper was still in it. I've always been in kind of tune with the supernatural, and I also have a psychic sense. I'm not saying I am psychic, but I just know things, and I can't explain it. Well, anyway, I know that my sister was very afraid of this house. She is 3 years younger than me. She would either sleep with my parents or with me, and she would never cross the long hall that ran through the center of the house by herself. I know that one day, I was sitting in the living room, and I got this really weird feeling. It really felt like I wasn't the only one in the room. I felt like someone was staring at me. Now keep in mind that my mother and sister had gone to the store, so I was in the house alone. At this time, I was about 9 years old. I was sitting on the floor, and I just happened to look up. If you are familiar with old houses, you know that some of these have glass windows at the top of each door that I guess people used for ventilation before air conditioning was invented. Well, the upstairs of this house had been added years after the original one story had been built, and the steps that led upstairs went even with the glass window above the door in the room I was in. There was also a small triangle of wood that was missing from the step, and that is where my eyes shifted to. There was something looking at me through that space. I was so scared that I grabbed my dog and ran to the front porch, just hoping my mother would drive up. I don't know what it was, but there was something up there. People in the neighborhood were always asking if the house was haunted, and one time, an old woman I had never seen before asked me if I knew of the girl that had been locked in her room, in my house, and she had died there. There's also another story that happened in the same house. My uncle was living with us. He was 70 years old, and I was about 10 at the time. One night, I heard him calling my father. He was shouting, and that is what woke me up. My father went running into his room, and this was my uncle's reply. I know you're not going to believe this, and I know I shouldn't be seeing this, but I do. There's a black woman standing in front of the fireplace, holding a little girl's hand, and she's wearing a red coat and hat. Then, my father said that my uncle's eyes followed something around the room, and then my uncle began to scream again, "No, go away, don't come near me." Then they disappeared. My father said he had never been so scared in his life because my uncle was being so rational about it, like he knew he shouldn't be seeing something like that, but he did. I knew there was something in that house. Although we moved out when I was 14, I still drive by to look, and I still do get a creepy feeling about it, just from driving by. My mom and one of my sisters just moved to New York, and we are living in the house my mom grew up in. Both of her parents are dead, and have been for a number of years. Ever since we have gotten here, my mom and sister have felt something in the house. I can't feel anything, but I can see something. The other day, I watched my dead grandpa of 11 years walk into the room. I ran upstairs so fast once, I was able to move and stay there until my sister decided to come downstairs for bed. The next day we started talking about what happened. My sister said that once she got into bed, and underneath the covers, she felt something on top of her, giving her a hug, and it hugged her until she fell asleep. My mom then joined in on the conversation and said that her parents still live in this house. She told us that she actually sat down the other day and talked with her father, and then her mother joined in and told her to talk to someone in our church. She did that, and found out that the person she was supposed to talk to was in charge of genealogy, and that they actually knew the same people from San Diego. This kind of spooked me out, because it took my mom a good few months to tell me this. She always tells me something I should know after I see a spirit. Thanks for reading. Many people see spirits in houses and such, so they conclude that the places are haunted. However, I believe that I am haunted. I've seen spirits my whole life, but some, when I was a child, I can't even remember, so my mother tells me. The one I'm going to talk to you about happened when I was about 1 year old. I'm now 18. We lived in a town just outside of San Diego, California. The people that lived in the house before us abused their children and locked them in the closets. My mom has found evidence of this, but does not know to what extent these children were tortured. My mom has had many experiences with the evil spirits that lived in the house. One day, when I was finished playing with my blocks, she went in to clean up after me. She knew exactly how many blocks were there and found that one was missing. She looked all over the room and even felt around on the bed and still couldn't find it. She then left the room to see if I had it with me, which I didn't, so she went back into the room, and there it was, just sitting on the edge of the bed where she had previously looked and felt. My mom always kept the house spick and span. She hated a messy house. She had just finished cleaning the living room when she left, and came back in and found a hairbrush in the middle of the floor. No one had been in the bathroom or the living room since she cleaned them. The spirits knew how to make my mom mad. They would always take things and put them way out of place, so my mom was always running around, putting them back into place, just to find them out of place again. She was always cold in the house, even if she was just sitting by a roaring fire. She would always see little black figures running across the room, and when she would look to see again, they were gone. So finally, my mom took my sisters and me out of the house and swore we would never go back in until my dad said a prayer to get rid of the spirits. So my dad was inside for a little bit, and then he came out and said that he said a prayer. My mom questioned him for a while, and then he had her convinced, so my mom took all of us back in the house. She then turned to my dad, and in a very stern voice said, "You didn't pray." My dad of course asked her how she knew. She said, "I'm sitting in front of a fire and I'm cold." His face just fell. So my mom had us all sit down and have a family prayer together. After that prayer to get rid of the spirits, they've never come back. We then moved out of the house, and I've been able to see spirits all the time. Every house, I've either seen a spirit or felt someone watching me. This is still going on. Just 3 days ago, I watched my grandfather walk into the room. He has been dead since I was 7 years old. If anyone knows what is going on with me, please email me. When I was 7 years old, my parents, my sister, and I lived in a home that was a one-story house that sat way back from the street. My aunt used to babysit us when my parents were away at work. Anytime I got into trouble, my aunt would make me go into a little bedroom in the back of our house, and she would make me stay in there for hours at a time. I never knew why, but I was deathly afraid of that room, and the whole time I was in there, I would hide under the blankets, too afraid to move, until she came to let me out. One day, while I was playing in the yard, I found out why I was so afraid of that room. While I was playing outside with my toys, I suddenly got the feeling that I was being watched. I looked around me, but I didn't see anybody. I went back to playing, but I just couldn't shake that watched feeling. I turned to look at the house to see if maybe my aunt or sister was around, and I saw a woman in the bathroom window, and she was watching me. I know it wasn't my aunt or sister, because they both have very dark hair, and the woman in that window had very light-colored hair. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to move. I stayed outside for the rest of the afternoon, because I didn't want to go into the house. When my mom came home that day, I finally went inside. I didn't say anything to my mom or anyone about what I had seen. I was worried that they wouldn't believe me, so I kept quiet. My sister and I shared a bedroom, and that night, I woke up to the sounds of cupboards opening and closing, like someone was looking for something, and I heard glasses being moved around, and the water being turned off and on. Well, being a little kid, I figured I was just imagining it, and as I lay there listening to this, I looked over at my sister, who was sleeping through this whole thing. The next morning I asked my mom if she was up last night, getting a drink, and she said no, but she looked at me kind of funny. That night, my mom had some friends over, and she sent my sister and I to bed early. My sister fell right to sleep, but I just kept thinking about what I saw in the window and what I heard the night before. My mom and her friends started talking about a lady who had hung herself in the back bedroom of our house. I could not believe what I was hearing. My mom then went on to tell her friends that she hears noises in the kitchen at night. The next day, as I was playing in the yard, I saw the woman in the bathroom window again. I started to cry, and my aunt got mad at me, so she tried to lock me in the back room again. I was kicking and screaming that I didn't want to go in there, but she wouldn't listen to me. As I sat on the bed, under the covers, I heard the door swing open. I thought it was my aunt to let me come out, so I uncovered my head, but nobody was there. I then started to hear a squeaking noise, kind of like something heavy hanging from a wooden bar. It sounded like it was coming from the closet. The closet wasn't really big, walk-in one. There was no way I was going to look in there. I just sat on the bed, listening to this noise, until my aunt came to get me. I later found out that the lady hung herself in the closet of that back room. I'm just wondering if anyone knows why she did this, and when it took place. Well, that's my story, and believe me, it is all completely true. Although this is a truer tale, it's not one of your spine tinglers, just something odd that cannot be explained. It was told to me several years ago by a colleague and happened to her mom, Jean, and some friends. Although Jean lived in Romford, Essex, she regularly went to a Keep Fit class, a small school hall in Upminster. The class had finished, and her friends had piled into a car and drove around the corner, parking near the chip shop, and they all ordered fish and chips, like you do when you've just had a good workout. They were all sitting in the car quietly eating, well, one person noticed something odd and nudged the person next to them. Eventually, they were all mesmerized, mouths agape, chips forgotten, as their attention was focused on the activities in the churchyard over the road. Quite clearly, they could see a solemn nighttime funeral procession of a coffin being carried on the shoulders by 6 pallbearers, all decked out in long, black-tailed coats. They silently watched the procession walk from one side of the church and disappear around to the other side, St. Mary's Lane, for anyone who lives nearby. Of course, they all asked each other, "Did you see what I saw?" knowing full well they did. The next day, Jean decided to visit the church as she just had to know what had happened. Maybe someone was buried late last night. However, she got to the church and found the vicar. She worded the question carefully so as not to look like a complete idiot, and was completely stunned when the vicar told her that no funeral took place last night. She said that from the look on his face, it was fairly obvious that he knew why she was asking, but being a vicar, he simply smiled and walked away. Spooky. I've been past the churchyard, as my grandparents used to live just down the road, and it is quite creepy looking place. All the stones are really old and crumbly, and covered in moss. None of the names or dates are readable. It's one of those graveyards where you can look at for a little while, and then you kind of shudder and have to look away. I used to think it was my childish imagination, but even these days, the place still gives me the creeps, even in the middle of summer. Well, like everyone else, I'll start off with some background information. I'm 19 right now, and ever since I was young, have had a fascination with death and what lies beyond. Every time I would read something, I would try to think I had a similar experience, but I didn't. I've lived in Chicago for most of my life in the same house. Nothing really special about it, except our basement floors are basically entirely dirt. But that doesn't really mean anything to my story. When my mom found out she was expecting my third brother, she decided we needed to do a little remodeling and room changing, so I ended up having my brother's old room, which also used to be my brother's room. Nothing unusual happened while I was living there until the end of my senior year in high school. I was asleep one night, and the room got unbelievably cold, although no windows were open, and it was a warm night. I buried myself under my blankets and tried to go back to sleep. This would happen from time to time. Then one night, I was woken up again by the extreme cold when I saw a shadow of a man whose figure I could not make out, just watching me sleep. He stood about a foot away from my bed. When he noticed I was awake, he just turned and walked out of my room, but he went through the wall right next to my door. The first few times I saw him, I was petrified and would just close my eyes tight till I felt the room was warming up. There were also times when I would see him coming from the kitchen, which was outside my room, and walk back into my closet. Also at night, I would hear things fall off my dresser, and I would just calmly as I could ask him to pick them up. And when I'd wake, everything would be as I left it. I never told any of my friends or family about this because they are not believers. Till one day, my mom had called me at school since I had moved out for college, telling me my sister refuses to go or sleep into my room anymore. That she woke up one night and came screaming into my parents' bedroom about a man who was watching her while she was sleeping in my room. I didn't say anything while my mom told me, but I did interrupt her before she could give me the description of the man my sister gave. I told her what I'd seen, and my mom dropped the phone. She kept asking how I knew, so I finally told her I had seen him before. I also told her if the lights ever go out in my room, to calmly ask the man to turn them back off. My mom just laughed at me. Also, I should mention, since I moved out of the house for school, my room remains hot to room temperature while I'm gone. But when I come home on weekends, the temp does not go above 50 degrees, no matter how high we set the heat or how many little heaters we put in there. Then one night, my mom was clearing out some of my sister's clothes, so I would have room for mine when I came home for the summer, and my dad was sitting outside in the kitchen watching TV. It was relatively late at night, and my mom had just finished clearing out a drawer and was about to get up when the lights went out. My mom said out loud, "Look, I'm almost done here, and Jennifer will be home next week, so please just put the lights on." And just as she finished, the lights went on, and my mom ran out of my room. Since I've been home for the summer, my room is back and stays at a normal temperature, which I'm thankful for. But I still hear things in my closet, and I'll see a light shine through the closet doors, although I don't have any lights in the closet. "20 years ago, when we moved into our house, a duplex, we were good friends with the tenant, and she had told us that she was going to be gone for the weekend. So we were home, sleeping on a sofa sleeper in the living room at the time, and we heard noises from the upstairs, sounding if someone was dragging furniture across the floor. My husband went to the stairs and yelled up to see if there was someone there, and the apartment was dark. So he came downstairs, and we fell asleep, not thinking any more about it. Well, the next day when she came home, she came downstairs and asked us if there had been a problem upstairs, and we said no. Why? And she said that she was just wondering why we moved all of her dining room chairs into the kitchen. At first I was scared, but then for years nothing had happened, until Jenny was born. One night, my husband had gone hunting, and I was awoken by a noise of her mobile being turned on. I went into her room, and she was just lying there awake, watching the mobile move above her. Then the last time that anything happened was about 3 years ago. My husband and I had divorced, and I was seeing someone. Well, my friend, as I call it, must have not liked him, because he always kept his cologne on the dresser, and at least once or twice a week, I would come home and find it either knocked over, on the floor, or in the garbage. At first we blamed the cat, but then we started closing the bedroom door, and it would still happen. Of course, He never believed. Nobody ever does. But I do. Nevertheless, I'm not with him anymore and have since been remarried and have no problems. Sometimes when I'm alone, I do feel that there is someone or something there with me and my daughter. I'm sure that you receive thousands of these stories, but mine is true. Whether you or anyone else believe mine, I know in my heart that it is true. Hello, phantoms. I got to be quiet, because if I'm loud, I might create an earthquake, and the dogs will bark so much that I'm not even going to edit this out. I planned on whispering to help everybody in the world cope with their fears of not understanding noise. I don't understand what I'm doing right now. Okay guys, I'm being weird again. But anyways, thanks for tuning in once again. I appreciate you listening and obviously tuning in like I just said. But as we have it, we have a dilemma on our hands. I can't talk, and I'll never be able to talk for the rest of my life. So what are you guys going to do to help me? The therapy helps, so comment, like, share, and subscribe. That's my therapy, so just make sure you do all that, and I think I'll be able to talk. Maybe not, though, because, I'm not good at that. So anyway, there's a lot of good content in this video specifically. There's a lot of good true stories. Again, according to the authors, they're supposedly true. But what I liked was pretty much every story. Every story had its own creepiness factor, too. Even though the funeral home story was pretty cool, and I really enjoyed that. But I think I liked the story before the funeral home story. Seriously, that's enough about me. Let's just ride off into the sunset and just end this narration with another one coming next week. Guys, I love you guys so much. Just remember, comment, like, share. Damn, I don't want to do that anymore. I just want you guys know what I'm trying to tell you. So, good night, good morning. I'll see you in the next video, and yeah, it is a habit that I do the comment, like, share, subscribe thing. I don't know why, it just is, but thank you guys. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. We'll see you in the next video before I embarrass myself even further. Bye-bye.